We are here with Dan Stork. Dan Stork, it's front of house for
Chelsea Wolfe.
Chelsea Wolfe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is it just Chelsea Wolfe or is there more?
I do Deaf Heaven and Taking Back Sunday as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Cool.
Okay, so what got you, first off, into running sound?
I did a degree in music.
Did you really?
Yeah. When I finished school, I did music at school. I didn't really know what else to do. So I was like, all right, I'll apply for music and psychology. And my parents said, if you're going to do music, don't be a performer. You won't make any money. Go get a studio or a business job. Little did they know studios would cease to mostly exist.
Seriously?
But yeah, so I kind of got into audio that way. Like, yeah.
That's so funny. I have almost the same story.
Really?
My family's in the music industry, and they said if you're going to do it, everybody and their grandma wants to be a rock star. So at least do the technical route. So.
Well, that's it. And I was never committed enough to be a musician.
I thought we are all failed musicians over here anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So we couldn't make it there, so we're over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Where'd you go to school?
In Brisbane, in Australia.
Cool.
Yeah, so a little way away, but
okay.
Yeah.
So let's connect the dots from I am interested in sound, running sound, to Chelsea Wolfe.
Okay, so I worked at like a bunch of like small punk clubs, stuff like that, and then I started working for like promoters in Australia who were kind of doing music I was interested in, stuff like this, and like punk and metal sort of tours. And I worked in those sort of clubs. You just kind of get to know the right promoters and the right people who are coming out. And then I was in Europe a lot because you could do it without the visas. It's quite hard to get to the States at first. And I was in Europe a lot, and I ran into a couple of metal bands that I really liked over there, and then they happened to share, labels and management with Chelsea, and yeah, we kind of went that way. And then when they came out to Australia, maybe like 4 years ago or something, I did a run with them out there, and then now we're here.
Awesome. So
yeah.
You came from more of the metal side. How would you describe her music? What would you categorize it as? Like,
it's
goth,
really tricky.
Metal, dark, like what would you?
I think there's some really interesting elements of industrial and like even like some sort of folk elements and stuff. We've got like at moments these sort of like really intense industrial bits with really ethereal sort of like folk styled singing.
It's very eclectic.
Yeah, and it's really like that's kind of what's beautiful about it, right? It's the dynamics of it. It's also what makes it so interesting and difficult as well. But
so your style going into mixing metal, do you have the same mindset going into mixing this artist?
I mean, there's elements. So I think like I try and make these big drum sounds that are kind of not up front, but you hear every drum hit. I feel like a lot of drummers get kind of left behind. You fall into one or two categories, I think, doing front of house. You're either all drums or the drums get left behind. And it's, trying to strike that balance and stuff.
Yeah.
And then even with some of the digital elements, the industrial elements, I try and kind of, I think they come from a similar sort of headspace sometimes as like an angular guitar.
Sure.
It's that sharp sound in your ear.
Yeah.
So it's working with those to kind of recreate some of those elements.
Yeah. So how many inputs for this band? Is this it's because you've got several. You've got a guitar. Obviously, she plays guitar. You got a drummer, and then you have a keyboardist.
And then we've got a whole wild world over there with Ben. So I think we're just over 30.
Okay.
We've got fairly standard drum kit. And Jess on drums also does a lot of E-drum stuff and the SPV and like some sort of hybrid stuff, which is really cool. Then we've got the two guitars, some acoustic numbers as well.
Okay.
And then there's quite a lot of stuff coming out of Ben's world. He's got like a whole tray up there of different noise and keys toys, with a few elements coming out of Ableton as like a playback style thing as well. And on the drums, I've just moved into starting to trying to use a few triggers for some of the more dynamic bits. Only to do gates, no inputs or anything, but just for triggering gates on the toms mostly. When she's on mallets, for example, it just saves me writing the gates in and out on every song and missing one accidentally. Yeah.
And do you have a monitor engineer, or is it?
No, so we have an M32. Everything runs through a split, which we've just ordered a new one of because we've got a couple of dead channels, so there's some odd patching. But yeah, we kind of got a setting that is like the groundwork that the band kind of can change on their phones during soundcheck.
Sure.
And then I make some of the on-the-fly changes on an iPad during the show.
All right, I don't see any outboard gear at all.
No.
I see some screens.
Yeah.
So are we doing plugins? Are we doing all native?
I've got a waves rack in here, and I'm doing a bunch of waves processing in here.
Okay.
And then I've got over here, I'm using Live Professor, which I've only just sort of dived into, and I really love.
What's your thoughts?
It's awesome. I've used it before with a couple of acts, but I've never done it with these guys, and I've kind of always wanted to, because for what they do, the reverbs are so important. I mean, she's got such a beautiful tonality to her voice that anything you can do that grabs that and pulls more out of it is amazing. So I've been using these Valhallas to kind of...
Valhalla's great.
Yeah, exactly. And it's on every band's record. So if I can use it live, that's what every band says to me. Like, oh, we use that on the record. I'm like, great, perfect. Then I'm in the right ballpark. And yesterday actually we visited Moog down at the factory, and they helped us out with some plugins and stuff. So I've been playing with those a little bit.
Cool.
You can get pretty out of hand with those, so I'm just being real careful.
Any summing?
Yeah, so I'm coming down to a bunch of groups. I've got, essentially, I'm bringing things down to drum groups, digital inputs, and then guitars, her vocals, and then all of the effects come into one group. And I've got a bunch of sort of bus processing on those things. So for example, I've kind of become obsessed with just putting an LS bus on everything, and just with a tiny bit of drive. Like barely using it. It's a color. Arguably, you can't hear it. Arguably, you can. I don't know. I got used to doing it, and now I do it. A little bit of like side chaining stuff just to make the vocals pop through. These are just, so this is just on the output groups. There's not really much. Same thing there on the guitars. I've been playing with this Magma BB tubes. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's one of those things that I started it super subtly. And I kind of haven't moved from super subtle, so it's there, but it's not doing a whole lot. Sam, I've got a little tube on my Smash group, SSL stuff. This is and it's funny because I still do the clean and Smash group for parallel compression
for drums.
Even though now they have a mix button built into the newest version. It's just habit. That's just how I've always set my files up. And I laughed when we got into the first air production. I'd set that up because I could just dial this back to
whatever
the percentage
you want
that I need instead of having this staging here.
There's something about having the two, though, that is just...
You can write it in certain parts, which I suppose I could do with the knob, but yeah.
Okay. So you don't see very many Venue 24Cs out. This is actually the first one I've seen out in a long time. Why the 24C?
It's kind of the perfect form size. There's enough faders. It's not cumbersome. The price point is good. Claire always look after us for that, so that's awesome. And it kind of just means that I can have most of my inputs that I need at any point accessible. I can come to my show inputs, and I've got pretty much everything here that I could need. I've always got a handle on some drums, some guitars, some things like that. Not everything, but I can pick and choose. Whereas if I go down to a 16 or something like that, it kind of...
Sure.
It gives me less options. And I've recently done a tour on a 16. It's cheaper, smaller, easier to load every day. But it does mean a lot of page diving. And every time you're looking down here, I feel like I'm kind of disconnecting from up there. And
Are you more of effects return or effects send guy?
A little bit of both, depending on...
Okay. Like to ride the fader a little bit?
I do like to ride the fader.
I do too.
And I used to be really bad for it. I actually got RSI in this hand.
Really?
Yeah, because there was one act I used to do, and I didn't use any reverbs. I would just do delays, I had 3 delays at different timing points, and I would kind of like ride them in, starting with the shortest one at the start of the syllable and ending on the harmony. So I'd kind of be doing this surfing on every single phrasing. And this finger doesn't really do so good anymore. But I've kind of been doing a lot of returns and bringing them out of Live Professor. I've been playing a little bit with as you guys heard in Soundcheck, there's a lot of sort of dynamic and change between some of the older material and some of the newer material, and things where they lean industrial or they lean metal or they lean which way or the other. And there's some quiet songs too with lots of room for these big open reverbs. And I like having it just here because I can just jump straight on, drive my decay up, drive whatever I need to, change the shape of the envelope and things like that. And then we move into a heavier song and I can pull it all back in. And I've got all my effects returning on one bank here, just so I can always grab them and pull them down. You know, when it's an acoustic song, when it's just Chelsea and the acoustic, for example, it's that much effect sounds ridiculous. It's like it's in a cavern.
Sure.
But when the whole band's bashing away, you kind of need that in there, and it fills up some of that space. So it's good to be able to just grab it and pull it back and
it seems like with this is. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It seems like with this, there's a fine balance between too much effects and just enough effects. And it feels like you're riding that line really well, because you could easily just go into she sounds like she's underwater.
It's incredibly hard. Thank you. It's incredibly hard. It's a weird one because when there's not enough effects, it sounds like there's no effects.
Sure.
They just disappear at some point, and I still have no idea why, but they just disappear. But then, as you say, when you go overboard, it sounds ridiculous. And to be honest, she has such an incredible voice that you can let it go dry through the PA. She would kill me, but you know, like people never like to hear themselves dry. But you could, and it would sound great. So it's just about subtly using a couple of different reverbs. And I think I've got maybe 4 or 5 options across the 2 that I kind of jump between depending on the song. And then make minor tweaks as we go.
So with the effects, talk to me about, do you do much spatial stuff? Are you doing any sort of panning, hard panning, or are you just pretty much a down the center person? Especially with these kind of rooms, the smaller room seems like you could play with it a little bit more and not have the hi-hat sound like it's over and
Yeah, I mean, with the drums, I've kind of got the set vision of where everything is, and they stay fairly stationary. I've done a little bit of movement with the guitars and where I send them into the effects sometimes. Sometimes I'll send a little bit, especially with her acoustic. And with her voice, I've got one reverb that's quite tight, and the balance is kind of pulled in. I've got another one that's quite wide, and then I have a third one that's like a full spectrum, a full sort of left-right balance, I should say. But I haven't played too much with sort of like ping-ponging and things. I just don't, I don't think it might seem inauthentic for this artist. It's kind of, I've used it a lot with some of my other artists, and especially with someone who does like a screaming vocal. I really like a ping-pong that kind of bounces that out in the room. But for her voice, I feel like, again, the tail is so nice to the tone that any sort of like ping pong delay kind of cheapens it a little bit, or makes it sound like, hey, there's some really wild effects going on here. And I would hate for people to think that the effects are needed, because they're not. And I mean, you can hear that when we do the acoustic songs, and it all strips back and it's just her and a guitar, and it's wonderful.
Any other tricks up your sleeve in terms of parallel compression, ducking, that kind of stuff? And you said you did the parallel with the drums. And
there's a fair bit of, so all of my channels pretty much have some really subtle stuff to pull the vocals to the front. There are moments when there's a ripping guitar solo, but I still want her vocal to be the most present thing. Only just and only subtly. It's not a pop band. It doesn't need to be the only thing you hear. But there's a lot of that going on across a bunch of things. And on the effects return, I believe, don't quote me, I've got the same thing there. And actually, if anyone from Waves is watching, hello, I love you. I just found this. I think it's their clone of a very popular other plugin that starts with S. which is very expensive and I can't afford, and no one will buy it for me. And this is like...
We'll do a GoFundMe for you.
Yeah. This is like a super cheap... well, I was in the beta test, and I hoped that might get me the inroad, but it didn't. This is $50, and it's got some really cool... similar sort of multi-band, but one of those plugins that you kind of just turn up the fader and it sounds better. And it's really good at grabbing, especially in a vocal or a very, with lots of reverb. You get these weird sort of frequencies, and as they go up the chain, they kind of get worse and worse. And especially in some different and weird rooms, you get all those weird high frequency stuff. So this is really good at grabbing that and just kind of taming it a little bit. And it's almost inaudible, but when you take it out,
you notice
it's definitely missing. But yeah, you don't notice any artifacting or anything like that. And I've got 3 or 4 instances of this running. I've got it on the effects. I have it on her main vocal, just as almost like a de-esser. And then I have it on the acoustic guitar, just for the sort of buzzy, plucky parts. Yeah.
One thing I appreciated listening to your sound check is that there was space for everything. And I think I would have a hard time with, especially with something with this many effects and this much ethereal, it'd be hard for me not to be stepping on top of everything and just having a mush of sound with it.
Yeah.
What's your trick to that, and what's your style into going,
I think
creating that space with it, and with all the effects?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually one of the things that I had to do in the first sort of week of this tour and in our production days was sort of rethink about how I'm mixing it. You get so used to mixing a band, and you set up your guitars and your drums and your obvious inputs, and then you plonk the vocal on top, and then there's a little bit of effects to help it blend. But I think with this, and what you may have heard when we were sound checking, is at points I'll drop everything out other than her voice, and then I'll bring the effects like I will with the studio to meet her voice. That's kind of where I want my mix to top out, only subtly, and then I kind of bring everything in around that. And ultimately, everything else has to work around that piece.
It seems like
that's
a lot
what people want to hear.
Absolutely.
They want to hear the whole band, but it's lyrical. It
seems like a lot of them are so focused on the kick as well.
Lead kick.
Yeah, lead kick. And this is definitely not that style of music for it. I thought you did a very good job
thank you.
with that balance of it sounds good.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's
which would be hard coming from metal, because it was like there's a lot of
I mean, and like I've done punk as well, and like a lot of punk, and that again is kind of that clicky up front kick, and it was actually it's now becoming a thing in like pop and from the EDM side as well, now that people want that thumping kick. But it is a change of pace. Like I still want to be able to hear the drums, but I want the drums to really be a unit, more than perhaps in other bands where you might sacrifice a little bit of cymbals because they're such a loud metal band that you want guitars, kick and snare. So then you bring your cymbals back, or however at the end of the day, it's a hierarchy, and it has to be. You can't have everything at 10. And it's the same as how I build like an in-ears mix for an artist, and I'm by no means an in-ears engineer, and I will say that to the end of my days. But what do you want? Pick 5 things. What do you want the most? You can't have everything. So let's start with, you want your vocal? Great. Then your guitar? Perfect. Then this. Everything else we can subtly just bring in, but you don't. If you don't need that, you don't really get it. And it's the same with the big speakers. If you want something to be the most present thing in the mix, make that your top priority.
Sure.
Yeah.
So touring at this level, what do you feel like is one of the mistakes? Because I'm sure you've seen a lot of newer engineers come through and do the club circuit. What do you think is some of the mistakes that some of the newer engineers are making?
I mean,
because there's a lot of hats you're wearing with this, and there's a lot of things that you're having to do. It's not like you have an SE that comes in with you.
No.
You don't have a monitor engineer. You don't have, like, someone hanging the points for you.
I mean,
so this is a lot of you have to know your stuff to
I think so, and I would preface it by saying that the people I probably learned the most from now are younger engineers who are teaching me, and generally it's like the old guy thing, the teaching you I had to ask someone how to do my live professor routing because that was too tricky for my old man brain, and there's lots to be learned from people who are coming in from different perspectives. But I think in the vein of what you're asking, it's technically a lead, the lead kick is quite prominent, or following what you think a mix should sound like based on a genre. Like I work in metal a lot, for example, so people mix things to sound like other metal bands.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to make your mix stand out? How does your artist stand out?
Yeah.
And maybe they want to sound like this other bigger band.
Sure.
Who knows? That might be a discussion that's been had.
Sure.
But it's that kind of, okay, well, what are you doing differently, or what can you offer in your mix that's going to be different to something they may have had before?
Yeah.
And the common one as well is like over smarting a reg. So I do use smart, but I've only just started using it.
Okay.
And that's 15 years in or something. Again, admittedly, mostly because I was too stupid to figure it out, and too cheap to pay for it. Not because I'm a purist, but I notice that I watch the meters, and then I'm like, oh, hold on, I've tuned PAs for however long, like 10 years plus. I don't need to look at the meters. They're here if there's something weird to assist me. Like, what is that? It's something in the low mids. Oh, okay, it is that. That's what I thought. But, walking out the front and actually listening to the PA is more important than making the lines match.
Do you have a song?
I have a couple of songs.
Yeah. What's the songs?
I use a Death Cab for Cutie song, which I purely picked just because I know it super, super well. And I like the way that the instruments kind of come in one after another, so it activates different parts of the PA, and gives me a lot of time to work on individual bits. So like, oh, here's the kick drum. Okay, cool. Well, that's how that part of the PA is going to sound, and then the drums come in, the rest of the drums, and the whatever else. And then finally the vocal comes in 3 minutes in, and by that point I've kind of got the lows and the mids kind of where I want it to be. And then, oh, okay, here comes the vocals, and there's a hi-hat in there that is quite present, and that shows me what's going to be present in the PA. And then I use Massive Attack, Teardrop. Again, just a song I know really well and has some really interesting low, mid, sub, and super low sub sort of stuff happening. And for most of the bands I mix, it's probably like too much sub-wise. But it kind of shows me straight away, like, oh, wow, that's where this is going to sit.
Yeah.
And when her vocal comes in that song, again, it's super present. And if something, if you listen to that song on headphones, her vocal is very, I don't want to say sharp, but it's very, like, in your face.
Yeah.
There's some really strong
present.
frequency. Yeah, really present, and you can almost hear it, like, the saliva in her mouth and her lips and like all those sort of things. So especially for this artist, when I'm trying to get that sort of intimacy of her right up against the mic, and there's parts where she whispers, and there's a lot happening around that.
Yeah.
I don't want that to get lost. I want it to feel to people in the audience like she's right in their ears.
Yeah.
In a really creepy way. No, like an ASMR sort of thing. But that is a perfect way for me to go, oh, okay, that's how that'll sound.
Yeah.
And also sort of shows me how, if that's present at 4K, well, what's that doing in this room at 8K or 12? And instantly kind of figure out.
So the camera died. I'm sure my editor will put something here to help out with that. Shout out to Ryan, thank you. All right, my favorite portion is drums.
Let's do it.
Show me some mics if you can, or just a stage in general.
Love to.
You do have a very clean stage, I will say.
Well, we try. And to be fair, the house techs today were awesome at helping us out with that. So thank you. All right, I'll try not to trip.
On camera?
Yeah,
There was a time, do
I had
it
a
now.
penchant for it. I fell off stage last year.
Is this your ears?
Yeah, so, oh no, this is the M32R's in there, but this is the ears and split, which is a mess right now. We have a new one on order from BTPA, who are going to sort us out with a much cleaner, much nicer
So look at this,
setup.
but ignore this, but look at it, but don't look at it. Look at it, but don't look at it.
Whoa. But this is clean,
Ooh,
and this is what matters. This is what people see, right?
Is it black on black on black on
so.
chrome? And
It's a yeah.
what is it?
I think it's a Tama Star Classic. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
That's cool.
it's really nice. I'm actually kind of lucky. I work for quite a few artists with these like Tama Star Classics, and they are awesome. I kind of just put the mics on and hope for the best. No, they really do. They do sound great. So it makes my job very easy. Everyone says, "Oh, the drums sound great," and I'm like, "Yes, they do. It's literally the drums.
It's the drums.
That's where it starts."
I see some Audix here.
Yeah, so
You got a D6 inside.
I've got
is
the
it just a,
so,
or out? Do you
so
have
my
just an
out
in?
is a D6. Oh god, my placement's going to be off. And then on the inside, I've got the Bayer Dynamic. It's like a TG something.
Okay.
I think it's like designed for jazz and stuff like that, but I like it because it doesn't have what all the other ones have. Like, I have all this equipment. Why do I need them to put an EQ curve on it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's super flat. It's super flat, you know, like, and you can do like a 91A with it and like make it clicky and a tacky, or you can make it like a, you know, open rock sort of jazzy kick. And that's why I like that. It's awesome.
I love how the boundary mics weren't supposed to be for.
Nope.
But we use it for.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that they were for something else
It's
until
kind of
like years
fantastic.
ago, and I was like, why are they called boundary mics? But yeah, I love the little Audix set.
Is this
Small.
D4s?
This is a D2. That's
D2?
a D4.
Okay.
I had a D4 on here. It died. I've got
Just committed suicide.
yeah.
Unalive
just
yourself.
started crackling, and then that was its final throes. But yeah, it's a bit of a hodgepodge of mics. I've got the SE overheads, which were replacements for my Neumanns, the little pencil Neumanns. But I switched these out because I just I trust them a little more on the road. They get dropped, you know, they get smashed together in the back of the truck. So
Okay, what's going on with the hi-hat mic?
it's a ATM 450, I think. Oh, don't quote me on the number. But it's a side address, which means you can get it into some really nice places.
Yeah.
It should, yeah, I think this, I've got a couple of them. No, this one's okay. One of them has like a really dented grill from just copping hits, because you can also use it as a really nice snare top mic with certain drummers and certain sounds. It's got like crazy high SPL acceptance and stuff, and then it's just the classic combo on the snare. I had a 201 on there, the Bayer, for a while. But for this snare in particular, which has a really nice body to it, it didn't need the extra support that like some snares you need that 201 to kind of crack.
Sure.
But this just doesn't need it. And the way Jess plays is so on that it's fine without it. So yeah, that's kind of the mic setup. And then the guitars are pretty straightforward. It's just 257s at the moment.
Classic. What is...
This one is pointing backwards for the moment, just because cleans up the ears a little bit, and then Brian can kind of lean in a little bit more to some of those leads.
Sure.
And kind of gain them up a little bit more. So it's just facing backwards to tidy
Smart.
up the ears, because Chelsea's mic is basically directly in front of it.
Yeah.
So
Ask for a little more guitar in her ears.
yeah, exactly.
Or in her mic.
Yeah. So we try kind of keep that one face backwards. Something new we're trying.
I am fascinated by this.
Oh God, this is out of my realm.
Whoa.
That is a Pulsar. I think it's a Russian drum machine. And that's about all I know about it. It makes lots of weird, cool industrial sounds.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all Ben's little noise table, and
Okay.
makes all sorts of weird, awesome noises. And then it's this is Chelsea's mic, which is just it's the Sennheiser MD431. It sounds amazing, but my one sort of issue with it is it's designed to pull a lot of tone in, and it pulls a lot of tone in from everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, you get that, right? That's what they do. They pull stuff in. If we had something with a smaller pattern, she wouldn't be able to perform with it quite the same way.
Yeah.
So I quite like the way it allows her to perform and that's the mic she's used to as well, which makes a big difference. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we have a band's about to come up in about 4 minutes.
That's right.
What is your advice to new engineers that want to be where you're at?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that someone told me was that especially at the very beginning, it's somewhat less about your skills and more about you as a person. And I don't mean that in a broad sense. I just mean if you're fun, easy to hang out with, keep things kind of under wraps, and you're good to be around, then that's how you kind of start touring with bands. No one's taking you out because you're the greatest sound engineer in the universe. Yeah. They're taking you out because you're a friend, you're good to hang out with, you might help them carry some shit into the venue. So I think that's one of the really big things for me. And I also spent a lot of time going into venues, and I would buy the sound engineer a beer, and he would let me hang out and watch him mix. And then every so often he'd be like, do you want to mix a support band? Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, please stay very close so when I stuff it up, you can help.
Yeah.
But it was that.
So what you're saying is you want people to come and buy you a beer?
No, I don't drink anymore, but it would have been great or bad back in the day.
A root beer. Guys, get him a root beer.
Yeah.
Or Topo Chico?
Yeah, sparkling water. Yeah, just line them up along my mixing desk. Nothing will go wrong.
Just right on top.
Yeah. Where if there's a big no drink sign, just pop them.
Put it right on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
If people want to follow you in your career, where can they follow you at?
I'm on social media, all the normal things. Okay. On Instagram, I'm at Dan Stork Audio Photo, because I'm a creative guy who can't decide what he wants to do. So it's all my sort of work-related stuff and photos I take on the road and stuff. Yeah.
Or a Chelsea Wolfe show near them.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you so
very
much for your time, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.